Here on The Colour of Country Life, fantastic to be speaking again with the independent member for Narungga, Fraser Ellis. How are you, Fraser?
Going well, thank you for having me on this morning.
Not a problem. We'll talk about this bill that you've introduced in Parliament, making good on an election pledge. But first of all, we've had the federal election roll through last weekend. What do you make of this move towards, I guess, independence and a pretty poor showing for your former party, the Liberal Party?
Well, all I can speak about is the local stuff, and Rowan Ramsey held his seat out here in Grey, and all I can say is that he's been a pleasure to work with over the past 4 years, and quite a few of the roads that we've managed to get fixed have been co-funded. So I'd like to, Rowan's been a pleasure to work with, and hopefully we can continue to go into bat for our part of the world for this next term.
Well, whilst the swing to independence was more so in these metropolitan areas and so-called teal independence, there's some similarity with how you went and how Jeff Brock went in regional South Australia, an attraction to, I guess, local representation, people with a profile in their local area.
Oh, yeah, look, I suspect that might be the case. I don't know a hell of a lot about the teal independence. I'm somewhat relieved that the country isn't being run out of inner city Sydney, and they didn't necessarily get the balance of power. But locally it's Rowan held his seat, and he's been a pleasure to work with, and I'm sure we continue to work together to make sure we get at least advocate and argue on behalf of our communities going forward.
Well, one of the things you committed to before the state election, where you were pretty comprehensively returned by local voters, was this issue about the conflict between farming and mining. We've got the Malinauskas Labor government in office, but you're on the crossbench there, and you're putting forward a bill to try and, I guess, give effect to recommendations from the Select Committee inquiry into this issue.
Yep, so we had a number of different pushes to try and get some of these issues resolved in the last Parliament, and the ultimate one, the final one we got to, was a Select Committee that Jeff Brock spearheaded, and the recommendations of which were tabled in the sort of dying days of the last Parliament, and I said to the voters that it's an issue I've been long interested in, and I would keep trying to progress it, and the next stage, I think, is to try and legislate those recommendations. So the first step in that is putting that draft bill out for consultation, because whilst everyone's had a chance to have input into the Select Committee report, no one actually gets to put feedback into the contents of the report. So just making sure that those stakeholder groups are aware of what I'm trying to do, and in some cases happy with the draft bill, and then after that we'll introduce it in Parliament and see if it gets any traction.
Well, I know with the mining side of things, I guess traditionally we've looked at ore bodies and copper and the like on the Yorke Peninsula. We've talked ourselves, and also Dan Van Hulst-Pelikan, the former mining minister, had talked about securing critical minerals, which, largely for battery technology, and apparently this is much more so in, former dune areas, farming land, more so than out in remote areas. Does it become even more critical we resolve this with these critical minerals, more prevalent in farming land like on the Yorke Peninsula?
Potentially, but I think you could make the argument that it becomes critical to resolve this issue with the way that the urban sprawl is developing as well. There's wonderful farmland being chewed up by different housing developments on the outskirts of Adelaide, essentially causing arable land to become a diminishing resource, and we don't preserve some of what we've got left, or at least place higher barriers to entry for mining companies on what we've got left, and we might find that we've got very little left at the end of the day. So,
well, you mentioned Jeff Brock was someone who was an ally in relation to this. He's in the cabinet. Is there a chance that he might be able to get a good word in with the Labor Party cabinet members to try and get this recommendations or this bill to get some traction within the government?
I'd never presume to speak on behalf of Jeff. I'll leave that up to him, but I'd like to think that we would get some traction. Three of the authors of the Select Committee report are serving in the different roles in the government, and I think the Liberal Party had at the state election at least, had a bit of an awakening about listening to the local electorate. Quite a few of the country members that didn't necessarily support our efforts to resolve this issue had quite big swings against them. So I think with a few authors of the report in the government, and then a bit of a wake-up call for the Liberal Party, then hopefully we get some traction on this and see if we can't get it sail through the Parliament.
Yeah, and what we're talking about here is effectively preserving prime agricultural land when, in particular, mining, but maybe, like you say, other developments might threaten the long-term or even the immediate-term continuation of those farming activities. Is that right?
Well, that's part of it, and we need to stress preserving doesn't mean putting a right of veto or blocking all mining forever. It's just recognising that some incumbent land uses are already providing, profitable use for those that inhabit them, and there should be, some primacy given to those incumbent land uses. And so preserving in that sense, not banning forever. And there are other functions of the report as well, like providing for a mining ombudsman to enforce and adjudicate on indiscretions by explorers on farming land to make sure that they're following the stipulations that have been imposes upon them and doing the right thing by the farmer.
Well, during the state election, the Chamber of Mines and Energy had a crack at, I think it was a not very thinly veiled attack at yourself in particular regarding what they were saying would be a right of veto. But does it turn out when all the dust is settled, you're actually not that far apart from the mining industry in terms of resolving these challenges?
Oh, well, again, I'll let Safe speak for themselves. I dare say they won't be tremendously fond of the bill, but I think on behalf of my constituents that it's something worth doing, and there's still plenty of dirt to mine in the state that it's not arable, and I'm sure we can make a good fist of it up there.
And just lastly, I guess just checking in with you on the Yorke Peninsula, we're seeing some pretty good prices for grain at the moment. Just what's the mood that you're picking up around the district when it comes to the farming community on the Yorke Peninsula?
Oh, hopeful, I reckon, at this stage. There's a bit of rain around, obviously, last night, and hopefully I think everyone's starting to get stuck into it pretty well and starting to finish off. So I think the mood would be best described as hopeful, and here's hoping we have a good year.
Literally. Well, thanks, Fraser. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll keep track of this bill as it, I guess you're introducing it into the Parliament. When is that coming in?
I think we'll just have a few weeks to give everyone a chance to have a bit of a say on it and let me know what they think, and then in a few weeks' time I'll introduce it formally, and then I think it'll sit on the table for a little while, and then we'll start trying to convince people to support it and see how we go.
All right. Thanks again, Fraser. Have a good day. We'll catch you again soon.
Cheers, mate.